Ever thought that passion and hard work were all you need to make great music? I did, but even after a decade as a musician and audio school grad, I was still struggling in the studio. For so long, I was stuck buying gear, watching endless tutorials, and overthinking every song. So I'm going to show you 20 of the most important lessons that finally unlocked my flow in the studio so finishing music actually feels easy and fun. I used to believe that the more effort I put into my music, the better it would be. More time, more complexity, more advanced playing. Surely that meant better results, right? But no matter how hard I tried, I still wasn't happy with my music. The problem was that I was way too in my head, overthinking every move and getting in my own way. It's counterintuitive, I know, because we're taught that good things require hard work. And sometimes that's true, but not always. There are countless stories of artists who say their best songs come through them. Black Hole Sun, Soundgarden, The Less I Know the Better, Tame Impala, Yesterday, The Beatles, all written in less than 15 minutes, almost as they were channeled, not forced. So I learned to let go and tune in. Sometimes you make bad music and that's okay, because sometimes you discover gold. Your best music isn't forced. It emerges through you while you're in flow, not when you try to control every detail. That's when you make something remarkable. Lesson 1, your best music comes from participating in a process, not trying to be the sole creator. I was completely paralyzed by resistance when I'd sit down in my first studio setup. Anytime I would open the DAW, all I felt was doubt, fear, and overwhelm. Even on the rare days where I'd make some progress, I'd quickly fall back into that heart-sinking feeling that what I was making was just bad. It didn't matter if I was writing a part, recording my guitar, or sculpting sounds, there was always this looming sense of disappointment. But here's what changed everything. I realized that writer's block isn't some curse. It's simply prejudging a moment with the pressure of achieving a masterpiece before you've even started. And what creates that feeling? Expectation. Lesson 2 is that all creative blocks are just expectation in disguise. It's a subconscious fear of making a mistake, not reaching some ideal, or let's be honest, making something that sucks. So lesson 2 is that any healthy creative process gives you the space to make music that's bad so the good stuff can also come through. But even when you give yourself permission to make bad music, there's another trap that almost every musician falls into. When I'd get stuck in the studio, I'd immediately start searching the internet for answers. It wasn't until I realized that I was subconsciously trying to escape difficulty that I saw the real problem. I thought that YouTube or a new plugin would have the answer, but this was just an elaborate way to avoid the one thing that plagues most music creators: uncertainty. Here's the problem. The creative process is inherently uncertain, and our brains are hardwired to avoid uncertainty at any costs. When things get real tough and we default to looking externally for answers, we're often just running from discomfort. This habit signals to your subconscious mind that you can't figure it out by yourself, and it denies you the power to develop your own creativity. So whenever you notice that you're stuck or hitting a wall, resist the urge to escape and embrace the uncertainty instead, because on the other side of fear is excitement. Lesson 3, self-doubt, overwhelm, and procrastination are all awareness problems around uncertainty. After I graduated from audio school, I struggled to stay consistent in the studio, even though I was more skilled and more knowledgeable than ever. I kept telling myself, progress should be faster. My music should be better. I should be finishing more tracks. And because I had to keep forcing myself through this lack of motivation, I thought that I had to force myself to make music. But I'd never stopped to ask why I wasn't feeling motivated in the first place. Music, which had always been something I loved, had somehow turned into duty, something that I must do. What used to feel like play now felt like work. And that's why I had to push myself to take action on what I should do. But when I started optimizing for fun, focusing on what interested, excited, and made me curious, I found myself wanting to be in the studio. No willpower required. Sure, there's still work involved, but it's a world of difference energetically between forcing music and flowing music. It all comes down to how you see things. Lesson 4. When work becomes play, motivation isn't an issue. Whenever I had a studio session go poorly, I would spiral into self-doubt, question my abilities, and my existence in general. Then I'd practice more techniques and sharpen my skills, hoping to avoid having another fruitless session. But eventually, another session would flop and I'd feel like it was a complete waste of time. This simple shift lowered the pressure and kept me from giving up in frustration. It's like practicing a guitar riff that's just beyond what you're capable of playing. You don't judge your progress by if you can play the part or not, but by how much you practice. Then you stay focused on what really matters and that's in your control, showing up consistently. I've never met anyone, any musician, any producer that always has great sessions. It's just not realistic. Lesson 5, focus on the process, not the results. When you release your attachment to each outcome, you create the conditions for massive results in the long term. For most of my journey as a music artist, I've always had my eye on a new piece of gear, a new guitar, a fancy plugin, a game-changing MIDI controller. I was convinced that it would be a shortcut to leveling up my music. But whenever I got something new, after the 2-week honeymoon phase, I'd usually never touch it again, and my music wasn't any better. That's when I learned about what is called GAS, which is short for Gear Acquisition Syndrome. It's incredibly common and quietly sabotages your music and your wallet. But here's what most don't realize. Every new tool comes with a learning curve, which delays progress, and the more options you have, the harder it is to be creative. Our brains do everything in their power to conserve energy, and decisions take bandwidth. So the more options you have, the quicker that your energy depletes. Nice tools can help and unlock new possibilities for sure, but real progress comes from narrowing your focus and mastering a few things deeply. Lesson 6, limitations are catalysts for creativity and mastery. In my late teens, I became obsessed with complex genres, prog rock, technical metal, jazz fusion, experimental electronic stuff. And the crazier the parts, the more odd time signatures, and the faster playing, the better the music was. But over time, I realized that the more complex something is, the more people you lose. And sometimes that complexity overshadows what actually makes music great, making you feel something and delivering an emotional experience. If you're interested in complex music, great, don't lose that. I certainly still am, but don't lose sight of the power of simplicity. Some of the greatest songs are dead simple, but incredibly powerful. Why? Because they focus on weaving a dynamic journey of tension and release. Lesson 7, great songs focus on tension and release, not complexity. If you want to write music that connects, focus on creating an emotional journey first. After learning to focus on emotion over complexity, I found myself trying to emulate a lot of my favorite artists, learning their songs, copying their gear, trying to match their style, all in hopes to make music that was to the same standard of quality. But no matter how much I imitated them, my music was good, but never remarkable. That all changed once I stopped comparing myself and let go of trying to be as good as anyone else. I realized that my influences would always shape my sound, but the real answers would come from within. Because the one thing that all of my favorite artists had in common was that they were undeniably themselves. Lesson 8, creating remarkable music is ultimately about knowing yourself. So if you want to make music that stands out, start by getting curious about your own creative instinct. No matter how much I studied, I still couldn't finish music that I was happy with. I went to audio school. I watched hundreds of YouTube tutorials, bought courses, read books, taken private lessons, but something was still missing. That's when I realized my approach to learning was the real problem. I'd been trained from the school system to always look to external authority for the answer. But once you've got the fundamentals down, the truth is there is no right answer in art. And searching for one can actually hold you back. It's like learning to ride a bike by reading books. You only really get it once you ride one. The answers will come from making music and learning from your own process. Lesson 9, the knowledge that you create through your own music making is infinitely more valuable than anything you can study. Once I started learning by doing, I still thought that I had to master every skill before I could make great music. I tried to learn everything I could about music, music theory, audio processors, compositional techniques, multiple instruments, advanced sound design. But all that knowledge left me completely overwhelmed and stuck in my head anytime I sat down in the studio. It was only once I realized that learning skills in isolation is massively ineffective that things changed. The real problem was that when I was studying these things, it didn't have any musical context, which is the whole point, right? So the best way to learn something is to let your current project show you what you need next. When you use a technique to solve a real problem in your music, it actually sticks and your learning path is always clear. It's only worth learning something when you actually need it, instead of trying to know everything before moving forward. Lesson 10, finishing music is the fastest way to improve as a producer. Focus on finishing projects, even imperfect ones, and let your music itself become your best teacher. I used to spend months perfecting a single track. I'd re-listen over and over, trying to perfect every detail. I'd find new problems, and no matter how much time I put in, I still couldn't get it to sound the way that I wanted. Eventually, I realized that there's no end to finding things to improve. Everything, and I mean everything, can always be improved. But what I didn't see is that it was actually limiting my ability to level up by obsessing over a single song. Are you making the song better or just different? Are your changes noticeable to the average listener? Are you so zoomed in that you lose sight of the big picture? It's like planting a garden. You put a lot of seeds in the ground, but only some of them grow. You don't have to force plants to grow. You just need to show up and water them. When you focus on quantity, quality naturally emerges. And the more songs you finish, the more practice you get writing songs. The more you experiment, the faster you find what works. The more ideas you have, the easier it is to identify the best ones. Lesson 11 is achieve quality through quantity. Ever since I started making music, I wanted one thing: to make something meaningful that sounds amazing. But no matter how hard I tried, even after going to audio school, my music still fell short of my artistic vision. As heartbreaking as it was, my music sounded cool, but it wasn't undeniable, and it didn't truly feel like me. And I tried everything, watching endless tutorials, learning more music theory, buying better tools, better plugins, better gear. Did it help? Sure, I got better at the craft, the technical skill of making music. But I realized that most of what I was doing wasn't making me a better artist. Art and craft are connected, but they're not the same thing. Craft is your skill, how well you execute, and that's important. But art is your soul, your expression, your meaning, your vision. And you need both, because craft alone won't make your music unforgettable. It's like building a beautiful house and designing the architecture and laying out the rooms and decorating it with all this amazing stuff, but no one is living inside. It might look impressive, but it's empty. Lesson 12, focus on art as much as craft. Make space for your own style, not just technical perfection. I used to wait until I had enough time to do a meaningful session in the studio. I'd wait until I had a 3 or 4 hour block on a weekend, telling myself that that's when I would finally make progress on my music. But half the time, those longer sessions didn't yield much, and overall, I just became inconsistent with my music. Let me tell you a quick story that shows you how everything changed. When I moved from the country back into the city when my first daughter was born, suddenly I had no studio setup and no time. I made a challenge for myself. I'd make music for at least 10 minutes every day, but aim for 30 minutes. And the goal was to jam out 3 ideas with 0 focus on quality. After 3 months, I had 89 ideas, and most of them sucked because I wasn't trying to make anything good. But out of those 89, 7 of them were not garbage, 16 had solid potential, and 9 were really good, almost full song ideas. Here's the crazy thing. Those 9 were magnitudes better than the 57 bad ones without having worked any harder on them. The takeaway, those daily imperfect sessions led to more and better music than waiting for the perfect longer session ever did. Lesson 13, touching music daily beats long sporadic sessions. You don't need more time to make great music. Just a little bit every day can build massive momentum. I used to waste hours of precious studio time scrolling through presets and auditioning sounds. I'd spend 10 minutes looking for the perfect sound, then eventually second guess it later and swap it for something else. After an hour of repeating the same cycle, I'd have nothing but a cool sounding loop and a ton of frustration. It's like sitting down to watch something on Netflix, only to realize you've spent 45 minutes browsing options. That all changed when I decided to audit my sounds and do a plugin purge. I spent a few sessions finding sounds and presets that I actually liked and removed any plugins and any sounds that I would never use or didn't match my taste, and only keeping the best ones in my DAW. I ended up with a much smaller but way higher quality pool of options. Then suddenly every sound I auditioned while I was in the studio was inspiring. And it was so much easier to stay in flow. No more endless scrolling, just making music. Lesson 14 is to curate your sounds, instruments, and presets so you work from a smaller, higher quality palette of sounds. Less is more. I used to primarily write all of my music by building riffs on guitar, spending hours playing around, refining little fragments, and orchestrating every little part until I was happy. This approach can create captivating moments and deliberate listening experiences, but it also led me to overthink my ideas, and at the end of the day, it felt overly orchestrated. It felt like something was missing. Freedom. The magic came back when I allowed myself the space to improvise freely while writing music without the pressure of trying to make something great. Most of what I improvised weren't nearly as interesting as the parts that I had planned out, but every so often I'd stumble across something I could have never written by design. Think of it as like exploring a new city without a map or a plan. Sometimes you discover hidden gems that you would never find in a tourist guide. Lesson 15. Improvisation reveals ideas you could never consciously orchestrate. After I graduated from audio school, I tried to run a studio. I had the skills, the experience, but I still struggled to find clients. I networked, I studied how to write production proposals, I did everything I could, but it was tough and I barely covered the cost for the professional studio space that I was renting. That all changed when I stopped chasing gigs and focused on creating undeniable work. When your music is so good that it blows minds, it speaks for itself and people notice. And then the right people who value your taste, value your style, will find a way to collaborate with you in a way that flows so much easier. Lesson 16, building undeniable work is the easiest way to build a career with your music and audio skills. I was a musician way before I got into production. So when I started using the DAW, it was as a means to an end to record music I'd already written on instruments. But after a while, a lot of what I made started to sound the same, and I felt a little stuck creatively. Then I saw one of my best friends making beats on a native instrument machine, and it looked like a blast, totally different from how I'd been using the DAW. That's when I realized that the DAW can be an instrument, a direct expression of your creativity, not just as a recording software or place to program sounds. I did some research, I bought Ableton and a used push, and game over. Now everything I do, from programming drums, playing synths, sampling audio, and everything else under the sun, has become an interactive and visceral experience. It brought out the musical touch that I had developed for years before in so many new ways, and now I can't imagine making music any other way. Lesson 17, make your DAW an extension of your musical creativity, not just a recording or programming tool. I used to work on my music for hours at a time, and sometimes my studio session would last for more than 8 hours straight. But even if I felt like I've been putting in the time and the effort, it was never reflected in the progress I was making in my music. The truth, most of these marathon sessions left me totally lost in the sauce. I'd completely lost objectivity. Every tweak felt like an improvement in the moment, but often ended up making my song worse. Imagine listening to your favorite song right now 10, 50, 100 times in a row. By the 100th listen, you'll be sick of that song, but nothing has actually changed about the music. It was only once I started limiting how long I work on any particular idea, unless I'm in flow state, that I instantly made more progress in less time. Shorter sessions kept my ears fresh, my focus sharp, which makes it way easier to make decisions that best serve the song. Lesson 18, don't over-listen to your own tracks. You'll lose objectivity. Work in shorter bursts and cycle between projects to keep your perspective sharp. I've always wanted to do something with my music, but most of my life, I was stuck working jobs that felt disconnected from my true passion. I searched for a career path that matched my skills and my passion for music, but there was never a gig that checked all the boxes. The system teaches us to go to school, study something you like, and hope to land a job that's somewhat related and tolerable. It's safe and a proven path, but it's not always the right one for artists. I walked that path for many years, but eventually realized that it just wasn't for me. And if I wanted to follow my true artistic soul, I had to create my own path. Tolerable is not good enough for me. As artists, we crave freedom, meaning, and expression, and that means making your own rules for life, just like we do in our art. So here's the brutal truth. There is no direct path for artists. You have to create it for yourself, which takes a ton of self-awareness and a completely different way of thinking. Your music, your career, and yourself are all art projects. Make your own rules. Lesson 19, being an artist is like being an entrepreneur. You need to think independently to find success. Whenever I went down an internet rabbit hole to solve a problem, I'd usually come out feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes I'd find an answer, but most of the time it was just a waste. That changed once I discovered a simple, repeatable process that solves 99% of my creative challenges in the studio. Out of all the studying, my personal experience, the advice that I've received, the courses that I've taken, and the mentors that I've learned from, the most valuable insight was this: focus on creating your own insight. Pretty meta, right? Here's why it works. No one knows your music, your process, or your challenges better than you. When you make space to reflect and ask yourself how you can improve, you'll be surprised how you find your biggest breakthroughs and how much of a creative force you truly are. And if you break down the word, it's called insight. After all, it's not outsight. So here's the practice. Once a week, take 30 minutes to ask yourself, what went well? What are the wins? What didn't work? What are the problems? And what could you do differently? In other words, what are the improvements? If you do this simple review, you will start building your own knowledge so that you're not always relying on someone else's answers. Lesson 20, simple weekly reviews are a creative cheat code. Try this for a month and you will be amazed at how much faster you grow and how much it diminishes the need for endless advice. All of these lessons are super powerful, but they only make a difference if you actually use them. You can watch 1,000 videos, fill notebooks full of ideas, and still end up exactly where you started, unless you actually put this into practice. So if you want a simple, repeatable way to put all of these insights into practice in your own music, definitely check out this next video. I'll walk you through a complete production system, step by step, so you can start bringing your best ideas to life. So I will see you in that video.